Bloodline El Salvador, Chapter 1. 7-year-old Ramon peered out of the door of the two-room shack. He watched as trucks filled with soldiers kicked up columns of dust along the dirt road passing through the village. He could sense that something very bad was happening from the quiet, tense conversations his mother and two uncles had in the evenings after their day of hard labor at the plantation. In the days that followed, he saw many of the young men in the village being forcibly taken from the fields by soldiers with guns. Sometimes he caught a glimpse of one of the young men leaving the village in the back of a military truck wearing an ill-fitting uniform. His uncle stopped going to work and stayed all day inside the sweltering wooden shack. Ramon understood nothing of the politics behind the upheaval his village was going through, and, if the truth were known, neither did his mother and uncles. He understood that his uncles were hiding from the soldiers, and that alone was enough for Ramon to cast his alliance away from the soldiers. One day, as Ramon was walking past the village market, a group of soldiers stood idly about. A soldier wearing a fancier uniform with bars pinned above his breast pocket motioned to him. "Hey, boy," he called out in an authoritative voice, "come over here." Ramon saw no other option but to walk over to the soldier, his heart thumping madly in his chest. He stood silently in front of the soldier, his head bowed, waiting to be spoken to. "Boy, do you have any older brothers in your family?" "No, senor, only 2 little sisters," lied Ramon, stumbling on every word. "I know you wouldn't lie to me, would you, boy?" Ramon shook his head, his eyes averted to the ground. The soldier was staring at him intently, as if he could visually censor every thought racing through Ramon's badly frightened head. With a snort of impatience, the soldier grabbed Ramon by his thick shock of black hair and slammed him against the wall. The soldier's black eyes were fierce with rage. "You're lying, boy!" he screamed with fury. "Lie to me, boy, and I swear that I'll slit your mother's miserable throat from ear to ear. Now, I'll ask you one more time. Do you have any other brothers living at home?" "No, senor, I swear I don't," sobbed Ramon, gasping for breath. The soldier slapped Ramon hard across the face, knocking him to the ground. "You're lying, boy!" he roared. "I'll be watching you. I know where you live. I know who your mother is. You remember my promise. You remember it well. Now get your miserable lying ass out of here." The soldier pulled Ramon roughly to his feet and gave him a good kick in the seat of his pants to send him on his way. As Ramon ran down the dirt road crying, he could hear the other soldiers laughing loudly. The soldier turned to his companions and said, "If he has any older brothers, we'll see how much balls they have when they see their little brother's face." Ramon knew better than to go directly to his home. Holding his rapidly swelling left eye, he stumbled down the road to a grove of trees bordering a field and hid behind a tree, crying silently to himself. As the night fell, Ramon began to get scared in the rapidly darkening grove of trees. Every shadow seemed to jump at him. Every rustle of leaves was an enemy soldier lunging forward to bayonet Ramon through his heart and leave him to bleed to death by himself in the sinister grove of trees. Finally, he could stand it no longer. Ramon scrambled to his feet and ran desperately toward his home. When he got to the shack, he slowed down and tried to softly slip in through the door. Suddenly, he was swept off his feet in a bear hug by his sobbing, hysterical mother. Thank God," cried Nadia, practically crushing him in her arms. "Where have you been, Ramon? Where have you been?" She held him for a few more seconds, then slowly loosened her grip on him. Under normal circumstances, Ramon would be ready for a good beating at this point. This time he knew that it would be different. Nadia got a look at his face with a gasp. "Ramon, what happened to your eye?" His mother was getting distraught, her chest heaving with emotion. "Juan, wake up!" she cried impatiently, shaking her nearest brother. Her attention riveted back to Ramon's eye as her brother stirred, grumbling as they got up. "What happened, Ramon?" Nadia soaked a cloth with a pitcher of drinking water on the table. Ramon broke down crying as his mother wiped his face and held the cool cloth over his swollen eye. "It was the soldiers, Mama," Ramon cried, his breaths coming in gasps as he tried to compose himself. "The one with all the medals, he wanted to know if I had any older brothers. I told him I had sisters, and he called me a liar and hit me." Ramon had his uncle's full attention when they heard him talking about soldiers. Juan came over to where Ramon was standing and squatted in front of him, looking intently at Ramon's eye. "They're less than whores, those chicken shit bastards." The softness of his voice belied the anger, bringing out bright splotches of red in Juan's face. Nadia looked at Juan in alarm. "No, Juan, you mustn't do anything. They'll kill everybody in this whole village. They look for any excuse." "Nadia, look at your son," he said, motioning toward Ramon's face. "You want to let this go unanswered?" "Bruises heal, bullet holes do not," snapped Nadia angrily. "Look, Juan," said Nadia, softening suddenly. "Both of you should go away for a few days. The army only wants to draft young men. When there are no more young men to take, they will leave." Juan was astounded. "What do you think the army will do to you if there are no men to protect you? They are less than animals, you know that," he said, slapping his fist into his palm for accent. "They will do nothing. They have rules." "Rules," Juan spat out in disgust. "The only rules they have are to give the biggest share of the plunder to the officers." "What can you do even if you stay? You don't own a gun. They have many guns, big guns," she said, widening her eyes for emphasis. "They will do as they please, you know that." Juan sat down heavily on the cot and buried his head in his hands. It was pointless to argue. He knew his sister was right. As soon as the army had milked the village of its men, they would leave. Until then, the army had vastly superior firepower, and they had no qualms about using it. Stories of the army's ruthlessness were common knowledge throughout the countryside. Nadia sat down next to Juan. "Both of you must leave tonight," she said, looking away from Juan. "They will find you if you stay." Juan gave Nadia a sideways glance. "Are you sure you want us to leave you and Ramon behind?" "We will be fine. I'll take Ramon out to the fields with me during the day. The soldiers won't be able to do much with so many people out in the open. They'll search the houses and maybe break down our door, but nobody will be here. I know Ramon and I will be all right. You go into the hills for a few days and come back. By then, we'll need to fix the door," said Nadia, laughing softly. Ramon's uncle slipped out of the village into the surrounding hills around 2:30 in the morning. By 4 o'clock that same morning, soldiers were pounding on the door. Nadia yelled at them to go away, that there was only her and a small boy inside. The door broke into 2 pieces in a hail of splinters. A soldier with a sledgehammer stood panting in the doorway with 2 more soldiers pointing automatic rifles inside the shack. They peered in anxiously and then visibly relaxed when they saw only little Ramon and Nadia cowering in the corner. An unseen, commanding voice barked an order to the soldiers holding weapons. "Are there any men inside?" "No, Captain. Only a woman and a small boy." The voice turned into a man, and the man swaggered insolently into the doorway. He kicked pieces of the broken door out of his way with knee-high black jackboots and stood silently for a moment, coldly contemplating Nadia and Ramon, shivering with terror. With a sinking feeling of dismay, Ramon recognized him as the soldier with all the medals pinned to his chest in the village, the one who had hit him. "Where is your husband and your other sons who live here?" "There are no other men, senor. My husband died several years ago. I have only my son left." "I think you're lying. I think you have teenage sons hiding in this hole someplace." I swear to you, senor, there is no one but us." Nadia was pleading now. "Bullshit!" screamed the captain. He quickly strode over to Nadia and grabbed a fistful of her hair, forcing her up. Nadia grimaced in pain but didn't make a sound. Ramon became hysterical and ran headlong into the captain's leg, flailing away with his little fists. The captain picked up Ramon by the hair with his free hand and sent the small boy flying through the air. Ramon landed flat on his back on the rickety kitchen table. The table collapsed under Ramon's weight, and he ended up writhing on the dirt floor, gasping for breath, his wind knocked out of him. "Do you see your son, bitch? That is a gentle love tap compared to what I'll do to him if you don't tell the truth. Now, where are your other sons?" "I have no other sons." Nadia broke down and was sobbing uncontrollably now. "Why can't you see that I'm telling the truth?" "I know you're lying because you're nothing but a whore. Whores lie all the time, don't they, whore?" He twisted her hair until she faced him, and then slapped her hard with the back of his hand. Nadia dropped to her knees, stunned and blinking with surprise. The captain forced her up again by her hair. Nadia wobbled unsteadily on jelly legs, her black eyes staring dully in semi-consciousness. The captain flung her roughly down on a straw mat on the floor. He addressed Ramon, who had recovered enough to weakly prop himself up on one elbow. "Watch closely, boy. Now you're going to see what happens to whores who won't help their country." The captain reached down and ripped Nadia's peasant dress off her shoulders, leaving her breasts exposed. Nadia instinctively covered herself with her arms and turned over onto her belly in a reflexive reaction to distance herself from the captain. Ramon watched in horror as the captain ripped the back of her dress down, showing his mother's buttocks gleaming in the shaft of sunlight filtering through the window. He panicked and ran desperately out of the doorway to the road leading toward the village. To Nadia, the whole scene was moving in slow motion. With a mother's sixth sense, she turned just in time to see her son running out the door, his short legs a blur, yet going nowhere fast. She reached out futilely as the captain unholstered his sidearm and calmly snapped the action back with his left hand. He took deliberate aim, his stance wide, holding the semi-automatic pistol in one hand with the other fist resting on his hip in a classic swordsman pose. She lunged for the captain, screaming a horrified "No!" At the same instant, the deafening roar of his gun went off in the confined space. She looked out the door in wide-eyed terror as Ramon's little body was flung into the air as if propelled by an invisible rocket. The captain just stood there, staring with a sheepish grin at Ramon's twisted prone body in the dusty road. Nadia sank to her knees in despair. "Look at what you've done to my son! You've murdered my son, you cowardly son of a bitch!" Suddenly the captain snapped. "What did you call me, whore? You stinking ugly whore!" The captain was in a rage. He leveled his pistol at Nadia. "I'll splatter your brains all over the wall, bitch!" "Kill me!" screamed Nadia. "Kill me, you chicken shit bastard, if you think you're man enough!" "No," hissed the captain. "I think dying is too good for a whore like you. I think that I'll treat you like the whore that you are." The captain unbuckled his belt and unzipped his fly. He stared coldly at Nadia and snapped an order to the soldier standing closest to him. "Hold the whore down." A half-hour later, a jeep with 4 soldiers drove up. 2 of them wore green berets and spoke a foreign language to one another. When they saw what had happened to Ramon, they became agitated, waving their arms around and shouting. They were obviously upset with the captain. They got into a heated argument with him. One of the other soldiers in the jeep translated, and it became apparent that the foreigners had won the argument. With a gesture of disgust, the captain ordered his men to bury Ramon along the side of the road. Nadia lay slumped against the wall, her eyes staring sullenly ahead, not focusing on anything, her mind not caring about anything anymore.